I'm going to cover. My purpose is not to change your religion. My purpose is not to make you believe everything that I say. On the contrary, I'm the only one in the world that will tell you, listen to everyone, read everything, believe absolutely nobody, including me. You see? And I'm telling you, don't believe me unless in your own research you can prove what it is that I'm telling you. Because this is the age of deception. And if you don't believe that, you might as well go home right now because you're in the wrong place. This is the age of deception.
The Jonas brothers are here. They're out there somewhere. Sasha and Malia are huge fans, but boys don't get any ideas. I have 2 words for you: predator drones. You will never see it coming. You think I'm joking?
U.S. drone strikes on Pakistani soil must end. That's according to the country's newly elected prime minister, who's once again demanded Washington respect his country's sovereignty. This comes amid mounting reports on the many civilian casualties in America's war on terror. RT's Lucy Kafnev met some of them, and her report contains some graphic images.
The locals call it death in the skies. In Pakistan's northwest tribal region, an American drone as seen from the ground. It's become the weapon of choice in the U.S. war on terror. And this is the damage it can wreak. Under President Obama, more than 300 such strikes on Pakistani soil against alleged al-Qaeda and Taliban suspects. But ordinary civilians also pay a price. This man is one of them. Amin Ullah was on his way to work at a mine near his village when a drone struck the area. He lost his leg in the attack. 3 other miners who were with him lost their lives.
We live in constant fear of another strike. We are simple villagers who are stuck in a war that we didn't ask for. It's a hopeless feeling. Death is above our heads all the time.
Although the attack took place 3 years ago, Amin Ullah says the pain is still severe. The sight of his injuries upsets his 4 children. Meanwhile, depression and anxiety and lingering fear have pushed him to take up tranquilizer pills.
The Americans should be able to tell an ordinary person from a Taliban leader. They should know who they're killing. What did we do to deserve this?
This is my extra injury in drone attack.
It's a question echoed by Nekbah Dar, who lost part of his hearing, his short-term memory, and nearly his foot.
The drone's shockwave was so intense that it threw us outside, far from the place where we were sleeping. After several minutes, there was another strike and it killed many more people.
Attorney Shahzad Akbar has sued both the U.S. and Pakistan on behalf of the civilian victims. He says they're the voiceless people of Waziristan, isolated by geography and politics.
I'd simply call it a concentration camp, that you have built a wall of military and militants, and behind that wall you're keeping more than 800,000 people who are not allowed to come out, and no one from the rest of the country is allowed to go in. And that's a kind of laboratory which US is using to use and test its drone program.
In many ways, the epicenter of the CIA's highly classified drone program is a black hole on the map, a region of Pakistan off limits to outsiders, especially Westerners. Now, evidence of the drone strikes is almost impossible to get, but these were smuggled to Islamabad from the tribal areas. They're believed to be fragments of actual Hellfire missiles, retrieved from a war zone most Americans never get to see.
Fragments collected by Noor Bahram, a local journalist who spent years documenting the civilian toll of drones, especially on children. Disturbing images of the living and the dead. For Noor, it's personal.
Whenever my 3-year-old daughter hears a plane, she runs inside and won't sleep that night. The children here have been traumatized by the drones. The sound of a door banging shut is enough to terrify them.
And that fear can turn to anger, a new generation radicalized by the war.
By carrying out drone strikes, killing innocent people who are not part of the conflict, you're just widening the conflict. You're giving a reason to people who were not part of the conflict here to become part of the conflict.
Of course, this has made me hate the Americans. We are angry and want revenge. They've destroyed our lives, my parents, my wife, my children. We all see America as our worst enemy now.
While promising to rein in their use, the White House says drones are both legal and effective.
This is a targeted, focused effort at people who are on a list. Drones have not caused a huge number of civilian casualties. It is not something that's being...
When translated, a defense that's cold comfort for the victims. Lucy Kafanov, RT, Pakistan.
Well, Obama's ironclad way of battling terrorists certainly sparked heated debate during his speech in Washington. At one point, the president was stopped in his tracks by an angry audience member. Earlier, my colleague Ivor Crotty outlined what made the woman break Obama's scripted auto cue.
Something that we haven't seen really before was that the presidential veneer, the Obama veneer was punctured somewhat by a heckler in the audience, and I think we can have a listen to and have a look at how Obama dealt with that.
He went on to... We went on...
Can you tell the Muslim people their lives are as precious as our lives? Can you take the drones out of the hands of the CIA? Can you stop the signature strikes that are killing people on the basis of suspicious activities?
We're addressing that, ma'am.
Apologize to the thousands of Muslims that you have killed. Will you compensate the innocent family victims?
The heckler was Media Benjamin of Code Pink. The heckling itself and that it took place is a real indication of how angry people are. As far as we could pick up on the audio, she pretty much addressed every element of Obama's speech. So she called on him to compensate families who have been destroyed by drone strikes. She called on him to close Guantanamo Bay, called on him to release the prisoners who have been set for release for up to 10 years from the camp. But he dealt with it. He's a consummate performer, and he dealt with it very well, as any politician of his stature would. He's pointed to the fact that free speech allowed this lady to have her opinion, and he felt she went on a bit, and I think at that stage, after a minute or so, he'd certainly had enough. For me, the key takeaway is that the policy of unmanned drone strikes needs to be changed. Obama is definitely trying to move responsibility for drone strikes out of the shadow of the CIA and into the Department of Defense, and he's certainly trying to do something about Guantanamo. But I think the key takeaway and the key lesson is that these two elements of US policy of the so-called war on terror are absolutely unsustainable.
If I do win a second term as president, let me just say something to all my conspiracy-oriented friends on the right who think I'm planning to unleash some secret agenda. You're absolutely right. So allow me to close with a quick preview of the secret agenda you can expect in a second Obama administration. In my first term, I sang Al Green. In my second term, I'm going with young Jeezy. Michelle said, yeah. I sing that to her sometime. In my first term, we ended the war in Iraq. In my second term, I will win the war on Christmas. In my first term, we repealed the policy known as Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Wait though, in my second term, we will replace it with a policy known as It's Raining Men. In my first term, we passed health care reform. In my second term, I guess I'll pass it again.
Do you know what you're buying at the grocery store? Chances are you don't. The U.S. government has refused to allow reasonable and common sense labeling of foods that have been genetically modified in laboratories. As a result, an estimated 80% of processed foods in America contain GMOs. In 2007, Barack Obama promised to make GMO labeling a priority.
Here's what I'll do as president. I'll immediately implement country of origin labeling because Americans should know where their food comes from. We'll let folks know whether their food has been genetically modified because Americans should know what they're buying. We'll let folks know whether their food has been genetically modified because Americans should know what they're buying. Finally, we spend a great deal of time on an issue that has racked the region, the issue of Syria. Under the Prime Minister's leadership, the Turkish people have shown extraordinary generosity to the Syrians who have found refuge in Turkey. And I know this is a heavy burden. I've made it clear again today that the United States is going to keep on helping countries in the region, including Turkey, shoulder this burden, doing our part as a major donor of humanitarian aid to the Syrian people, including those refugees in Turkey. And we're going to keep working with our Turkish partners to deliver the food, shelter, and medicine that's needed to save lives. At the same time, we're going to keep increasing the pressure on the Assad regime and working with the Syrian opposition. The Prime Minister has been at the forefront of the international effort to push for a transition to a democratic Syria without Bashar Assad. And Turkey is going to play an important role as we bring representatives of the regime and opposition together in the coming weeks. We both agree that Assad needs to go. He needs to transfer power to a transitional body. That is the only way that we're going to resolve this crisis. And we're going to keep working for a Syria that is free from Assad's tyranny, that is intact and inclusive of all ethnic and religious groups, and that's a source of stability, not extremism, because it's in the profound interests of all our nations, especially Turkey.
And bring a killer to justice.
Make no mistake, we will get to the bottom of this, and we will find out who did this.
It is Tuesday, April 16th.
Human rights groups and some foreign officials, including the US Secretary of State, they've all come out to condemn the excessive use of force by the Turkish police. However, it's the US which is one of the main exporters of tear gas and pepper spray to Turkey. In fact, the country allegedly sent over 60 tons in the past decade. That's worth more than $20 million. The US also sells tear gas to the countries like Egypt and Bahrain. RT's Marina Portnaya reports on who's cashing in on all the rivers of tears.
For 6 days, the world has seen video and images of Turkish police cracking down on thousands of anti-government protesters. And while unarmed activists of all ages have been targeted indiscriminately with tear gas and pepper spray, critics say that behind closed doors, the United States has long played a major role in aiding the police brutality that is currently unfolding in Turkey. You see, according to reports, Turkey has bought $21 million worth of tear gas and pepper spray in the past 12 years, and the United States is listed as a main provider. See, the U.S. is one of the world's largest manufacturers and exporters of tear gas, and whether sold or given, tear gas shipments from the United States to anywhere in the world must be approved by the U.S. government. The three big American tear gas manufacturers, Non-Lethal Technologies, Defense Technology, and Combined Systems, Inc., have reportedly exported tear gas to dozens of nations rocked by widespread protests, including Egypt, Bahrain, Tunisia, and Yemen. And now, as the uprisings in Turkey grow more dangerous by the day, dozens of activists have taken to the streets in New York City, rallying across from the Turkish consulate to condemn what they call the government's brutal and deplorable use of tear gas against its own citizens.
They are not used for protecting our lands or protecting our humans. They are right now used for destroying our humans who's just asking for their freedom of speech.
The problem is that they're using tear gas that expired since 2004. There are pictures of it. There's evidence of it. That is the problem. Every day they're using worse and worse chemicals.
American activists also know what it feels like to be targeted with so-called crowd control technology. Tear gas canisters were widely used against protesters participating in the Occupy Wall Street movement. And experts say that the corporations manufacturing those technologies are profiting at home and abroad by assisting governments around the world that aim to repress freedom of speech and democratic movements. Reporting from New York, Marina Portnaya, RT.
And Nurettin Gultekin was one of those gassed by police in the Turkish capital, Ankara. He explained exactly how it feels to be targeted by the heavy hand of the authorities.
I am the one of the most that has been exposed by the tear gas and water cannon. It reduced my vision and caused crying and sneezing. And since I have asthma, during the event, I had multiple severe asthma attacks. And I can say that the main provoker is police and government. We are tired of a bullying government with a corrupt media. We don't have any freedom of speech. Taksim, this park matter, has become a matter about more than just saving a bunch of trees. This is a protest against ignorant mentality that hurts its own people. They cannot scare us. We do not do any harm to anyone or anything. But however, the provokers, such as government and police officer, calls us and shows us that we hurt everywhere without any reason. We cannot accept that.
The unrest in Turkey has now claimed a second life. Police, already facing widespread criticism for using excessive force, are now being accused of being behind the killing of a young man. RT's Irina Golushko in Istanbul has the details.
22-year-old man did die after sustaining a head wound during the night protest in the south of Turkey, in the city of Antakya. Now, some of the protesters are saying the shot came apparently from a police car. However, this information, we have to stress this, hasn't been confirmed yet. So we have to wait and see for at least somewhat official results whether or not this indeed was a case of severe police brutality. Earlier on Sunday, there was a young man who also died after a car slammed into a crowd of protesters. So far, these are 2 confirmed deaths, but the people on the street that we have been speaking to, they're saying that they have personally seen at least 4 or 5 people who are dead, more than 1,600 people who have already been injured, and more than 1,000 arrested. There's more and more people coming out on Taksim Square, going to Gezi Park just in Istanbul alone. The number is increasing, and most of them are really peaceful protesters. And we have talked to one of the Young Lawyers Association representative who explained to us why people continue to flock the streets in Turkey, voicing their protest of the current government.
We have a lot of groups, not only lawyers. Here are some doctors. It is the organization of the community, of the nation. They are asking a government to resign. They become a union here due to the illegal acts of the government.
Now, the situation is somewhat different in a different part of the city, just a couple of kilometers from here. And protesters there are actually targeting the Prime Minister's offices. The police are retaliating with tear gas, water cannons, rubber bullets, plastic bullets. Prime Minister Erdogan is actually out of the country. He's on a trip to Morocco. And speaking on Monday, he said that the situation in the country, in Turkey, is calm. He has also disregarded the words of the Turkish President Gül, who called off to end police brutality and is actually meeting with the representatives of the top opposition parties in Turkey in order to try and solve the situation. However, Prime Minister Erdogan has said that he doesn't understand what the president says when he said that the protesters' message has been heard. Members of the public sector are also going out and protest today. So this just adds to the magnitude of protest that we are seeing. So really, the protest movement in Turkey does look like it's only gaining momentum.
RT correspondent Irina Golushko right there. She's in Istanbul, I should say, closely watching the events, not just there, but nationwide as well. You can follow her on Twitter for the updates and, of course, the latest developments as well.
Hey guys, Dabu7 for this June 4th, 2013. I want to show you a little bit of what's going on over here in Turkey. As the Illuminati regime has entered yet another country, they have taken over the government in Turkey. They are a huge NATO ally, and here the people in this country see what's going on, and they are fighting. They are taken to the streets. In return, the police brutality has gone up a level to where they are using chemicals on these people, which I'm about to show you here in a second the proof of. They are beating pregnant women in the streets. They are shooting people with live rounds. They are using multiple water cannons to blast just one individual that's in the streets. But it's turned to chaos over here because these people have nothing left. I want you to take a good look at what it looks like in the streets when there's nothing left, when the people rebel against their government. Look at that, 4 or 5 cops that were just beating on a woman. Oh, right to the face. This is ridiculous. They're just walking down the street clubbing people. This is what is going on in these countries, folks. And now we have dozens of photos showing toxic chemical gas canisters used on the protesters in Turkey. They have surfaced showing toxic chemical gas containers that were used on the attacks on the people in Istanbul. Now, you're not hearing about this from your government, are you? You're not hearing about this from your world government, that Turkey is using chemical agents in canisters all across the place. I mean, all over. On their own people. On civilians. Isn't this the same reason that they want to go to war with Assad in Syria and topple his regime? You see, they're trying to gain control and make Turkey stable so they can use Turkey as a platform to launch into Syria. But before that's going to happen, they have to gain some kind of upper hand in this region. And the people, you heard me right, the people are fighting back, and they're stopping this from happening. They may not know the full agenda, but they know that they're under attack. The country's under attack. They're being shot at. They're being poisoned. and they know something's going on. Their country is being taken from them by an outside source, or their government has sold them out, which is very similar to what's happening in this country. I just want you to be prepared for what is going to eventually come to this country. They do not care. And this is the United Nations NATO country of Turkey. And United Nations isn't stepping in and saying anything about this, are they? No, they're not. They probably supplied these weapons. I'll leave links, folks. It makes me sick. They want to brainwash people in the whole world and tell them they want to go to war with Assad, and they want to murder Assad and his regime in Syria because of chemical use, which they cannot prove. And here you have a ton of proof that they're using chemicals on people inside of Turkey. I'll leave links, guys. Till next time, Dabu7 with some underground world news.
The Deputy Prime Minister has apologised, but it's a very qualified apology. He's apologising for the initial handling of the environmental protest here. There was a protest camp in the far section, in amongst the trees here beyond Taksim Square. They were camped out there protesting against plans to turn that into a shopping centre. It was the police action there using tear gas, burning down protesters' tents, that initially sparked this. So the Prime Minister is apologising for that, but he says he owes no apology for what has followed it. And you can see what has grown up. I mean, there are people here now making the most of this, selling watermelon and fruit in this square. There are people again gathering in, perhaps not the tens of thousands today, but certainly the many thousands. What's happening here in front of us is that protesters have formed a human chain to pass supplies of water into the main camp that's still back there in the trees in Gezi Park, where this all started. But it's a very peaceful atmosphere here. It's very, very positive. People are very welcoming. They're coming up to us and asking us where we're filming for. They're very happy that these pictures are being shown. But you can see beyond the protesters there, I mean, it's almost like two separate cities here. Once darkness falls, there is a real change in the atmosphere. I mean, this is a minibus that was burnt out in the initial days of protest here. It's now being used for protesters to sleep in overnight. But as soon as darkness falls, and we're seeing this ourselves every night, the protesters are peaceful here in the square. There's just a watermelon vendor trying to get past there. They're peaceful here in the square, but they're pushing on now to try to get to the Prime Minister's offices, and that's where we're seeing repeated clashes overnight. We're seeing real injuries there, with protesters being hit with gas canisters. We saw some of that at very close range ourselves. So it's very peaceful here. There remain clashes every time it's dark, and the question is how they are going to resolve this, how they're going to persuade all of these people to move peacefully on from what has become a feeling of a fairly permanent presence here this week.